Alright, so in today's video we're going to be taking a look at a Heljan Class 128 Parcels diesel multiple unit. And this one is in the Royal Mail Red livery as opposed to the blue, since this model comes in both variants. Now today I'm going to be doing the video a little bit different than I normally do, in that I'm going to be doing a voiceover, since when I recorded the footage for this particular model, I was just getting over a pretty nasty cold, and to be candid, just didn't feel like doing commentary with my wireless mic. Now, if you own one of these, and you're gonna understand what I'm talking about. The first time that I opened this and held it, I was kind of taken aback by how much it weighs. And when I say this thing is heavy, I mean, like, if you have a Class 47 that you own, even a sound one, this thing probably weighs 3 to 4 times that. It really has a kind of a ridiculous amount of weight to it. I'm not sure if that's to make it feel like it's better quality, or if they find it runs better that way, but it's seriously heavy. So I took a quick look over the manual, mostly just to figure out how to potentially take this thing apart, since it's the first Heljan that I've ever owned. And I know my way around Bachmann's these days pretty well, but not Heljan. So the only real critique that I have about this Heljan Loco is that while the details on it are absolutely fantastic, I mean, they really go above and beyond in terms of separately fitted parts, is that this particular livery, at least in my opinion, looks a bit toy-like in its default state. So it's pristine, it's unweathered, and again, the details are fantastic, but something about it on the layout it really does look a bit toy-like. So when I go to start doing my weathering projects, probably later this year, early next year, this is probably one of the first locomotives that I'll weather, since I think it'll make it look much better than it does out of the box. I had to mute the video a little bit back there because my wife was still getting over her cold. She was coughing in the background, and so I gave her a hard time and said, "Hey, this is serious business here." She kind of laughed. I'm very fortunate in that my wife is super laid back about my modeling, since I know there's some wives who are not cool with the amount of expenditure that can go into a hobby like this. So you can see here, the tooling appears to be new, because everything is, super crispy. I mean, all of it is just so well done. I was really impressed. I don't know how popular Heljan is across the pond, but they don't come up very often here. It's pretty rare to come across a Heljan, and I was sort of taken aback at just how well made. I don't know if well made actually is probably the right thing to say, because actually half the parts came off when I was taking it apart. But it's not as big of a deal, I think, as it looks, because it looks like most of those separately fitted parts on the bottom are just kind of clipped into place, and so if they fall off, they go right back in. And what I don't show on video is I took some Tamiya glue and went in and just bonded them all to the plastic permanently. And I wonder if they do that so you can detail them separately. I don't know. But in any case, as usual, we'll take a look at the wheels here. And I like to do this just because it gives me kind of an idea of the previous owner. And in this case, I think at most it might have been run by the seller on a test layout, since he purchases train lots and then sells them. But this has essentially had no runtime, which is not always a good thing because trains that are run, they tend to be broken in and run quite smooth. I had one train that had some serious hours on it, and it ran excellent. Whereas the ones that have been sitting on the shelf for a while, usually the oil gets hard and the some of the oil will drip all over the wheels and even worse onto the plastic. Although I've never seen the plastic get damaged, so I'm assuming it's plastic safe oil. So the way you take this particular model apart is it's actually easier, I think. Once you get the hang of it, it's easier than some of the Bachmann models. There are 2 screws behind each bogie for a total of 4 screws. And the only thing that I would mention before you try to get inside the unit or take the shell off is that I think because this was sitting for a while, the front and rear portion of the shell where the driver sits was really kind of stuck to the body. And I don't know if that's because the plastic's kind of warm at the factory or if maybe it's just sat in a box, you know, for a couple of years. But I had to take some toothpicks and sort of loosen that up. And I suggest toothpicks as opposed to flathead screwdrivers, since you'll damage the toothpick before you'll damage the shell. It'll help you loosen things up a bit. So I really struggled initially to get the shell off. If you're not familiar with my videos, I do long form, no matter how long it takes for me to get something apart, since I think that's probably valuable. But if you don't want to hang around, you can click the timeline below. I try my best to always mark the timeline appropriately so you can get to whatever part of the video that is relevant to you. So after trying to hide my frustration, what I figured out, the best way to get these off, and I'll show it to you in just a second, is take some toothpicks around the shell, and I got that trick from Double O Bill. And on this model, there are some footsteps, and the footsteps are on the body as opposed to the shell. And I'll zoom in shortly and show you how I did it. But you take a plastic opener and put it between the footsteps and the shell and gently sort of twist back and forth, and the shell will start to come off. But still, if it's your first time, that shell's going to stick to the side quite a bit, and you just need to work through and loosen it up. See there, you can kind of hear it unclipping or unsticking from the side of the body. So if you're curious how much I paid for this, this was a 124 US, so 124 pounds to dollars. What is, or dollars to pounds rather? What is that? So it was 100 pounds for this model, which I think is a pretty great deal. And the shipping was, I don't know, it's about the equivalent of about 8-9 pounds, or about 10 bucks. So it was a pretty good price. Probably because when the British steam locomotives come up on your popular auction sites, American modelers and British modelers alike will purchase them, because you can, you know, if you have like an A4 or something like that, it'll blend in even on an American layout pretty well. But something like this is so unusual on an American layout that I find they just don't sell that well unless you have a British modeler specifically making the purchase. They'll sit up on the auction sites for quite a while, and you can usually get a pretty good deal. I've also noticed lately, and I'm assuming this is because we're in sort of the post-pandemic era now, that I'm not 100% sure, but I suspect that during the pandemic a lot of people got into model railroading and, you know, probably spent quite a bit of that sweet pandemic money on model trains. And now that we're out of it, I think some people have decided perhaps it's not for them, because there's an unusual amount of fairly new models that I've seen pop up on auction sites like Vectis. that I wouldn't normally expect to see, and the pricing on them is quite good. Like the Class 128 DMU that I just reviewed. I mean, I got that thing for almost, what, 50, 60, 70% off what it costs in the stores today. So, pretty great. And although it's not often that it's particularly useful, I always appreciate when manufacturers, oh yeah, see, that fell right off. That's one of about 3 parts I think that are going to fall off in this video that have since been repaired. But anyway, I really appreciate when manufacturers make sprung buffers. I know it's not used very often unless you have particular coupler setups, but there's something about it that I just appreciated. I really hate when I push on a buffer and it is glued into place. So here you can start to see I finally figured out that probably the best way to get this shell off is to take the plastic opener between the steps and the shell. And again, it really was due to the ends. You know, I kind of figured out. See, there's another piece in typical, I guess, Heljan fashion. I think, I don't want to digress here too much, but I think Sam's Trains did a review on a Heljan, and I think he had the same issue where parts were just kind of falling off left and right. But don't let it discourage you from purchasing one. They're really easy to put back on, and I don't know, maybe they do it to make it easier to weather or detail them separately if you want. In one of my other videos, I had a user or a commenter below that was a little irked because I think it was the Class 47 video where I said, let me show you how to take the shell off without breaking the windows. And I took the shell off and broke the window. And it took about 15 minutes to get to that part, something like that. And he had made a pretty nasty comment, essentially saying that, well, what a waste of time. Since I got through and you ended up doing the very thing you're trying to teach us not to do. And you know, I like to keep my video long form and as unedited as possible, since if I break the window, hopefully you'll see what I did in the video so that you won't break the window. And it ended up being kind of great because I was able to repair the window and showed the process that I went through with that to glue everything back together. And it wasn't like it was permanently broke, it just popped off. So I don't think I've ever, in my history on YouTube, which is since its inception, ever really gave a YouTuber a hard time over something so trivial, but that's the internet. And 14 minutes in, we are finally inside the unit. So I took a quick look on the inside of the shell since I was curious to see if there was any reflection devices and things like that. And no, the shell's basically empty with just a couple spots for the screws to grab onto. And just a little tip, if you have to go glue that part back on, you see the part that fell off in the front, I glue it from the back for those spots, not the front, since the holes go all the way through the case or through the shell. So I popped it back on, went inside the shell and added the Tamiya glue there so that you couldn't see any of the, I don't want to risk putting it around the sides and that kind of shininess showing up from the glue. So for the most part, I was expecting there to be more inside of this given the weight, but for the most part, this model is fairly easy to work on. The only thing you have to be kind of mindful is the wires are quite small. Here I'm removing the DC decoder. So sometimes you'll get lucky when you purchase a used loco and it'll have a DCC decoder inside of it. But in most cases, they'll have sort of the, I think they call them dummy decoders, blanks. I don't remember what the term is. But essentially, this is a decoder that's put in place for DC users. So I pop these off and stick them into a box where I have a collection of about, I don't know, 10 or 15 of these things. Now, what you need to be real careful of if this is your first time doing this is these 21 pin decoders are a little difficult to get off. So I'm prying from both sides, and the reason for that is because I bent a pin on one of my locos and it snapped right off, which really sucked. Thankfully, it snapped off sort of in the middle, and so with the decoder pushed all the way down, it still works just fine. But I'm much more careful now about taking these off. And even here, what I'm doing is straightening the pins because one of the pins looked a little bent when I took the decoder off. I really wish there was something on the other side to kind of counteract that move, or maybe if it was in the middle, but whatever. You get used to it. So I'm taking a look at the drive shaft there just to see if it requires grease, and I end up doing it a little bit later, but it absolutely does. So you can access the drive shafts here without removing the bogies or even the driver's compartments. But in just a few moments, I end up taking off the left driver's compartment because I couldn't figure out initially how to get to the gear set in the bogie, and I thought it was maybe, maybe there would have been a servicing spot on the top. There's spoiler alert, there's not. There are only 2 screws that hold in the driver's compartment, no clips or anything like that, but the wires are a little tight, and as you'll see in just a moment, the only way to get that out safely is to pull the wires out of those top and bottom, the little slits there you can see by my pointer finger and my thumb. You got to pull those wires out. In order to do that, you have to lift up on the sellotape that is on the driver's compartment. And here I still couldn't quite tell if there was a service port, but I was hoping that I could, get away with having to take off the caps on the bottom, the bogie covers. It's kind of funny, we have all this technology in model trains today. The tooling is excellent, all these separately fitted parts, advanced computer chips and speaker systems and sound systems, and we still use tape to hold the wires down, which is fine. It gets the job done. It's kind of funny. Here I was hoping I could just pull those out without removing the tape, since I, if possible, try to keep the tape in place so that the wires kind of stay in place if I have to disconnect anything. But what I ended up doing here, you'll see the camera shake in just a moment. I took a picture of the wiring and then decided to just go ahead and remove the plugs. These plugs are pretty tricky to get out. It's hard to grab onto them. You can't really yank on them and pull them off because even though the wires look a little thick here, they're almost, I wouldn't say hair thin, but much thinner than the older locomotives, and it was quite tricky to get these out. So the best way to do it is, it doesn't show real well on the camera. It may on full screen, but there's sort of a little indent in the plug itself, and you can kind of get something sharp in there and pull it out. In my case, I just carefully wiggled wiggled the plug back and forth, and it eventually came loose. Another nice thing about the ease of working on this is if you look straight down where the decoder board is, where that sort of main board is, it's actually set on top of a piece of plastic that can actually, once the plugs are all undone, the wires are unhooked, you can just slide that piece of plastic out and it exposes the motor underneath. So if you ever had to replace the motor or add a little bit of lubricant, it's pretty easy to do on this model. Although when I took a look earlier with a flashlight, it was fine. It didn't need anything done to it. And imagine my disappointment when I get in there and see there is no service port. Now, if you're wondering why I went through this whole hassle, the reason was because I couldn't see, especially because I've never had a Heljan logo, I couldn't see a cap that came off on the bottom initially. I thought it was just all one piece, that you had to get to the gears from the top. And while you can see the worm gear there, and you could put, I suppose, a little bit of grease there, I really like to take a look at the gears, especially because I purchased used, to make sure there's no cracks and nothing that needs replaced. I'd rather find out now than when I put it on its first run. And somebody asked me in another video, why don't you test them out first? Why do you go straight to working on them before even seeing where you're at? And the honest truth is, I don't really know. It's kind of a habit that's happened on my videos, and I think it's because once you've worked on these for a while, they're fairly straightforward. You've got bogies with gears, a worm gear, a drive shaft, and then a motor. And you can usually tell when you're in there if there's going to be a problem even before you put it on the track, unless it's electrical. Then you can tell right away. The electrical, I find, as long as you're not hitting it with static or rubbing your feet on the floor, knock on wood, tends. I've never had really too many electrical issues. It's almost always lubricant or cracked gears, which is less of an issue these days. But once upon a time, cracked gears was not an uncommon thing. So here I was just trying to see if there was a way to pop anything off on the top to get into the bogie where the gears are at. And no, you can pop off the cover in the bottom, but I still included this in the video because if you ever need to get to the worm gear or you have to replace the drive shaft, which they do crack on their ends from time to time, especially if you run them high speed, this pretty much shows you how to get in there and take those out. So at some point the light hit the clips on the side of that cover down here, and I kind of had an idea that, okay, that was a waste of time. Although, useful information. There are, I think most of the Bachmans, there's a clip on the left and the right side at the end of the bogies. On the Heljan models, there's a clip behind each wheel, and so you've got to get something like these tweezers in there, something very thin and pointy, and just kind of bend that clip back, which you'll see in just a second. Now I was pretty determined to get in here because while it may not show on camera, I could see that some of the lubricant, this obviously had been sitting on a shelf for a while, either in a store or an auction house, whatever the case, and you could see it had kind of just clumped on one side. So I think this was stored sideways on a shelf somewhere, and I wanted to get in there and clean some of that up. And what makes this so difficult is it's hard to get behind the clip because the wheel's in the way, and you can't take the wheel off without getting the clip out. So I really prefer when the clips are at the beginning and the end of the bottom of the bogie rather than on the sides here. Kind of a funny story. We took a trip to the UK not too long ago, and brought back some rolling stock and a couple other items that are really hard to find. And I didn't want to put them into my check bag since if you watched enough YouTube videos, you know how those are usually handled. So I packed them into I call it my Dora the Explorer bag, but my carry-on bag. And I had stuffed it full of trains and was kind of concerned of what it might look like with all those trains stacked going through the X-ray machine. So sure enough, I get pulled over, or pulled to the side, and British TSA is a lot friendlier, I think, than American TSA. But he comes over and he says, do you mind if I look at your bags? And I said, yeah, I have a ton of trains in there. And I said, I know it probably looks real bad on the scanner, but I just didn't want to, and I don't want to put them in my my checked luggage. And he said, model trains? And I said, yeah. And he says, And so he's digging through the bag, and then he pulls out a knife, and he says, it's not the trains that I'm worried about, it's the knife. And I was like, my bad. So I had taken a Swiss Army knife with me so that if I had to modify anything in the hotel on vacation with my model trains, that I'd have some tools just in case I needed to look at anything and take it back to the store if there was an issue and I forgot to take it out. And unfortunately, the Swiss Army knife was tossed into the trash, where I have no doubt it was disposed of, or, I don't know if those guys just kind of dig through that stuff at the end of the month and take home what they want, because it was a really nice Swiss Army knife. So it's not the trains we're worried about, sir, it's the knife. Oh, whoops. Alright, so when I got in here, the gears were in better shape than I thought. So the gears were essentially in pristine condition, unrun, or at least very, very minimal runtime. And it had plenty of grease in here, but it's all kind of just clumped to the side and gotten all over the axles there. So I really wanted to get in there and clean this up a little bit. And I think I added a blob of Labelle lubricant on there, but it really wasn't too bad. And something like this, especially if your model's been sitting for a while, is really not that uncommon. They're really meant to be run. So if you have a large collection of locomotives, and when I say large, I mean like 10, 20. I know there's people out there with like hundreds, but at least out in the States, there's some guys that have massive basement layouts, and they quite literally have hundreds of locomotives and rolling stock. But it's good to just run them. I try to run all of my models at least every 3 months. So I'll put the diesels away and pull out the steams and run them for a month, and then I'll kind of put them back into their. I have a kind of a special case that I carry them all in.
You had to take it apart.
So I had to mute the video again here because my wife came over, and just like my commenters, she's like, "Why are you taking it apart?" I said, "Because I want to see how it works." Is it broken? Not yet. she's she's like, "I just don't understand why you take them apart if there's nothing wrong with them." So I want to see how they work. Leave me alone. So I guess it's like anything, right? Once you figure out how these Helgians are put together, they're with the exception of the bogey covers there, and I don't know if that's the correct term, but um, I think they're actually easier to work on than the Bachmann's. 4 screws, pop off the shell. Watch out for the smokestacks, and then on this, if you need to service them, don't go through the hassle that I went through unless you need to do something to the drive shaft or the worm gear, and just stick a sharp spot in the little. You can actually see the 4 notches right there pretty clearly. Just stick something behind them and pop it right off. And I think this side was actually in a little bit better shape than the other side was, but we're almost done here. So after I go and clean this side up, I'll kind of clean the bottoms, and then I actually had to pause the video and come back 5 days later because I thought I had a 21 pin decoder under the layout in my my storage bins, but I did not. So I had to jump on the bay and get a 21 pin decoder, which thankfully are easier to find now than they used to be. I used to have to order them directly from the UK and wait, like 2 weeks for them to get here, but not now. You can get them in a few days, thankfully. So one thing I want to mention that I want to try next time, but I thought about it after I had finished working on this model. If you've ever seen a cuticle cutter, I actually think those would work better than what I'm using here, because the tweezers work okay, but you can't really get behind there and pry it, which you really need to do almost like a crowbar. And afterwards I thought, a cuticle cutter would have probably worked pretty great if you could find like an extra long one, and you would be able to stick it between the wheels on either side and really pry it like a crowbar, and I think that would have worked much better. But I hadn't thought of that at the time, and I don't think my wife would have been too thrilled if I stole her cuticle cutter and started using it on my model trains. Actually, so I just looked it up. It's called a cuticle trimmer. Cuticle cutter looks more like a pair of pliers. What I'm talking about looks more like a little pen tool. So it's a cuticle trimmer, not a cuticle cutter. I think that probably would have done the trick. And I applied, it looked like a lot, but I applied less than a half a pea worth of lubricant here because there's a pretty good amount in there. And I suspected, you know, once the thing got moving, a lot of that grease will start distributing itself throughout the gear set. And I don't really have any scientific proof of this, but I like to add a dab, at least a dab of fresh oil in hopes that it'll kind of catch the stuff on the side and pull it in. I don't know if that actually works, but that's what I've always done, and all my trains run quiet and smoothly. I rarely have issues with them because I really try to take care of them. I don't know why. You ever wonder why we spend so much time on these things? I mean, it's just plastic and metal, but there's something about them. I don't know what it is. But if you're a modeler, if you know, you know. So here I'm using a little bit of 70% isopropyl alcohol, and I try to only do this the first time I purchase a loco, since I don't want to dry out the plastic. And if I ever have to clean the bottoms of these in the future, I would usually just use a little bit of mild dish soap. But on first purchase, I'll usually use isopropyl alcohol. So here we're pretty much done, and you'll see the video transition because I had realized I didn't have any decoders. So in the 5 days that had passed, I put the driver's cab back on, just follow that backwards, and put the wires back into place, referencing the image that I had taken earlier in the week. So here I'm just showing you the decoder model. It's a Soundtrax DCC mobile decoder, and they are about $20 US. They're really, really affordable, and I highly recommend them. They've got all the basic stuff that you need outside of sound, and they work great. They run smoothly. I'm a big fan of adding momentum to my trains. I don't like when they stop on a dime. I like them to prototypically stop in a quote-unquote heavy fashion, and I've noticed that these inexpensive decoders do it quite well. And even some of the sound decoders are really starting to come down in price now that the chip shortage is over with. I think you can get economy UK diesel for about $60 US, which is pretty great, since it used to be a sound decoder. You couldn't find one cheaper than about 125 US. They're pretty expensive, so. So here I was just triple checking I hadn't knocked anything off, and making sure there's no front or back. It doesn't seem to matter which way it goes on. Hopefully, I don't know. Tell me if I put tell me if I put it on there. You know what? Now that I think about it, because I don't know if it's symmetrical on both sides, but tell me if I put these on wrong. But it appears it doesn't matter which way you put them on. The only thing that you have to be careful of again are the smokestacks right there, because they'll catch on the body, so you just kind of got to pull them forward so they can loop over the bottom of the body from the shell. None of the other detailed parts, surprisingly, really got in the way. So here the one of the bogies was sticking a little bit, and it was just hitting a detailed part. I was just making sure that nothing was binding, which is something you want to be pay attention to if you ever take the wires off, like I did. I always give the bogies a wiggle afterwards, because sometimes they'll come out of place and they'll wrap themselves around something they're not supposed to be, and the bogies will stick. And it usually doesn't damage the wire, but once you put it on the layout and you go to, go around, say like a tight curve or something like that, then it'll jump off the track. So here we're just putting the 4 screws back on. That's all it is. Pretty easy to work on, really. I tighten these down, and you know, I have some pretty strong. I have a pretty strong grip, probably from playing the piano for so many years. So I have a real bad habit of breaking plastic. So what I like to do is tighten it up as you would any other screw, and then I'll kind of use my thumb, middle finger, and pointer finger to do the rest of the tightening, and I kind of pinch it as if you're, you know, picking up a peanut off of something, and that usually prevents me from over tightening, since you're screwing into plastic, and the chance of these screws coming loose is pretty unlikely. You can also see my old man sweater, since it was starting to get a little cold in the house. So there we go, serviced, decoder added, ready to go to the layout. All right, so we're here on the layout. Let's go ahead and get everything booted up. It's the one of the Class 47s in the background there. So this is probably going to be decoder address number 3, since that chip was right out of the box. So let's give this a go. There we go. So we got working headlights, working tail lights, and I think this has cab light. Let's see here. Yep, there we go. See the back cab light turning on and off, and the front. And it doesn't really show up as well on camera as is often the case, but the cab lights inside of these are super clear. In fact, it's probably some of the clearest cab lights I think I've got in any of my locos. Really well done. Let's go ahead and set a momentum of 3 on the power cab, and then let's see if this has any issues. We'll go backwards first. Nice. So I can hear the flywheel. It's probably not going to pick up on the camera, but I can hear the flywheels a little, not grindy, but you know when you get a new loco, it just feels a little stiff in the knees. But other than that, it's running really smooth. I don't normally like doing this because the other side of my layout's terrible right now, but I'm going to go ahead and swing the camera around. Uh-oh. I'm not going to cut that out. So I forgot to, what's going on here? I forgot to flip my turnouts back to straight, and so brand new decoder, shorted out. Yeah, this layout has taken me forever to rebuild since we got rid of the old pendulum station, but it's coming along. All the turnouts are now hooked up. Actually, no, all of them but one are hooked up, and there's something like, I think I've got 12 on this layout, and all of the frogs are powered, so it was a real pain in the butt. Let's go ahead and turn the camera here. Yeah, I mean, this sucker runs real smooth, really good, really great model. All right, so guess I've had good luck on the last couple ones. It's running great, lights look good, so we'll go ahead and switch out to some footage of the DMU running around the layout. Thanks so much for watching as always, and until next time, see you soon. Bye-bye.